Namaste Dile, this is Sakina Bhatt and welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly feature in English about this week's news on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's look at the headlines first. The remedy to reduce conflict in the name of religion is to have conviction in secular ethics, says His Holiness the Dalai Lama at Malmö University in Sweden. His Holiness the Dalai Lama completes engagements in Netherlands on second leg of his four-nation visit. His Holiness the Dalai Lama arrives in Germany, joins Nobel laureates on discussing non-violence. Solutions for human rights in Tibet discussed at a side event paralleling UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. 16th Tibetan Parliament convenes its 6th session, pledges fervent efforts to resolve Tibet issue. His Holiness the Dalai Lama visited the Malmö University and presented a lecture on secular ethics to the students as part of the 80th anniversary of the Swedish aid organization Individually Manuskolep on Thursday last week. Expressing his gratitude to Individually Manuskolep for the enormous support rendered towards the development of the Tibetan refugees, His Holiness affirmed that majority of the Tibetan refugees are now quite successful and well organized. His Holiness said that one major success attained by the Tibetan refugees for the past 60 years would be the preservation of the traditional Tibetan knowledge adopted from the ancient India's Nalanda tradition, also crediting the Indian government for their contribution in the preservation of the Tibetan language and religion.
You see, as a refugee, stateless, but you see, we carry the various sort of work for preservation of Tibetan knowledge.
His Holiness further emphasized on the importance of hygiene of emotion to be equal as physical hygiene and that those values should be included in the modern education system. His Holiness also greeted members of the Tibetan community in Sweden, Denmark and Norway on Wednesday last week. His Holiness reminded the Tibetans about the just cause of Tibet, as Tibet only seeks the rights and freedom enshrined in the Chinese constitution and the implementation of these rights not just in Tibet Autonomous Region but also all over Tibet. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, during his conversation with modern scientists and tech experts, spoke on technology and compassion at the inauguration of an exhibition on the life of the Buddha at De Nieuwe Kerk, Amsterdam on Saturday last week. Expressing his admiration for the ancient Indian tradition and his 3,000-year-old yet scientific understanding of human emotions and workings of the mind, His Holiness said,
"So in order to investigate this deeper level of consciousness, over 4,000 years, India already developed the practice of single-pointed meditation that we call shamatha. Then the analytical meditation, analyze, that we call vipassana."
His Holiness was then escorted to the exhibition on the life of Lord Buddha. His Holiness the Dalai Lama addressed a public talk on why compassion is essential in our troubled world in Netherlands on Sunday this week. Troubled by the violence and destruction perpetrated in the name of religion, His Holiness reiterated the role of Indian secularism, which has created the foundation for religious harmony in the country. On Tuesday this week, the Tibetan spiritual leader met with Dutch MPs and gave teachings on 8 verses of mind training. His Holiness the Dalai Lama joins Nobel laureates in discussing non-violence and peace in Germany on Wednesday this week. His Holiness's long envisioned dream of a non-violent, disarmed world, a world union similar to the European Union, was echoed among a panel of Nobel laureates.
This century should be century of dialogue. That means whenever we find some disagreement, different interest, solving that through dialogue, not through weapon. So this 21st century should be century of dialogue is possible. So in order to reach that, firstly, denuclearization, what called, very important.
A group of representatives and advocates of non-violence spoke about non-violent struggles led by various communities. Secretary Tenzing Dardan Sharling, Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration, gave an in-depth and impactful presentation on the non-violent struggle of the Tibetan people.
Though much of the world would want to believe that Tibet is a lost cause, given China's rising dominance, I want to tell you all that this is not true. In this room, we have with us Golok Jigme, right here. Golok, when I talked about the 2008 uprisings in Tibet, Golok Jigme was in Tibet in 2008, organizing side by side with our brothers and sisters in Tibet. A filmmaker and an activist, Golok Jigme was arrested twice by the Chinese government because of his involvement in the Tibetan freedom movement. And all of us thought that he had disappeared. But today he's here with us, Golok Jigme. Ever since his escape into exile, he has been traveling the world crusading for the cause of Tibet. If Golok Jigme has not given up, we cannot either.
The human rights situation in Tibet under the Chinese occupation was brought under spotlight once again at the UN Human Rights Council at its ongoing 39th session on Monday this week. Society for Threatened Peoples, an international group protecting minority peoples who are threatened by oppressive regimes, organized a side event titled Human Rights in China Seeking Solutions, the Case of Tibet Autonomous Region and the Areas where Tibetans Live, highlighting the fact that China's push for human rights with Chinese characteristics, which places development among human rights, is not only a threat to Tibet but also to the norms underpinning the UN human rights system. Secretary Dardan Sharling of CTA said that China's third cycle of Universal Periodic Review, due on 6 November this year, presents a good opportunity to highlight the human rights situation inside Tibet and strengthen advocacy for Tibet. On Tuesday this week, the 16th Tibetan Parliament in Exile convened its 6th session, pledging to exert fervent efforts to alleviate the sufferings of Tibetans inside Tibet and to peacefully resolve the Tibetan issue. In his opening remarks, Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament, Khenpo Sonam Thempel, expressed grave concern at deteriorating situation of human rights inside Tibet. He also condemned China's blatant violation of religious freedom and practice in the Tibetan Buddhist community. Speaker further paid rich tributes to His Holiness the Dalai Lama for his immeasurable contribution towards the good of humanity and the Tibetan freedom struggle. The Parliament reaffirmed its commitment to follow and fulfill the noble wishes of the revered leader. He urged the members of the Parliament to respect the formalities of Parliament proceedings and participate in a healthy discussion with the interest of 6 million Tibetans in heart. The 10-day session is scheduled to conclude on 28 September. So much for this week. See you next time and have a great weekend.